topic, which is why that direct engagement works. Um, some of you might be familiar with the concept of story of self, and that that direct communication of why you're a researcher, why you're a farmer, why you're interested in organic agriculture, why you're here in this workshop today, even is just a really you're trying to give a way to tie your own personal story to this larger narrative, right? This larger movement that's working towards a sustainable agriculture system, a system that is both just and helpful for the ecological, the economic, and the social systems that are being utilized. So, you have the experiences that you have. I don't have those experiences. So, just like making sure that you're sharing that information experiences from your life with legislators and legislative staff is really important because that's the information and kind of experiences and knowledge that decision makers really need to know for them to get like spur to action. Um, Another great thing about that direct engagement, that story of self kind of concept, is you can really tailor the message to the listener, right? If the staff member or the legislator that you're meeting with or hoping to communicate with comes from a farm, you can detail that in that way, right? And like make sure they couch things in messaging that really resonates with that. If they're a researcher or a PhD scientist, which some legislators are, being able to really get into the nitty-gritty details of the scientific literature is something that could actually be done, right? But then folks that might be completely brand new to the subject and never really contemplated organic agriculture or agriculture in general, then being able to tailor that message to the like beginning stages is something that's really important. And again, the context that you're bringing it is also like available to change, right? Like if you're going in, having a meeting in an office, your demeanor and how you speak is going to be different than if you are able to bring the legislator to your farm, right? That's just like by both virtue of your comfort levels in those different kind of settings, but also just the vibe, right? Just the kind of what is going on in the context that you are in. And I think one thing that really hits home is that experiential learning lasts a lot longer than presentations or kind of handouts or anything like that alone. So if you can have the legislator themselves or their staff members visit your farm or your research plot or anything like that, that's how minds are changed. And we've heard that from legislative staff and legislators themselves that they didn't understand that organic agriculture was actually, a business model, not just some, hippy dippies on the coast trying to make things different, right? Like they're both two conflicting realities can exist at the same time, but it's also one of those things where they finally understood that this isn't just a kind of set of priorities, but an actual workable business model that is providing economic growth in their district, right? And that completely changes their framing, completely changes how they think about these things, and potentially creates a really strong ally and even champion for our issues. Another thing for direct engagement, especially in this context, is just making sure that you're presenting yourself as an ally and resource. You're not trying to necessarily persuade right off the bat. You're just saying like, hey, I'm an expert in this field, right? Like I do research in this work. I farm. I understand how these markets work and how they affect me. And I want to make sure that you understand that as well. And I think one thing that a lot of people when they think about Congress and they think about this policymaking process is they really get abstract, right? Like Congress is a thing, it's not a collection of people. It is a collection of people. And staffers are generally young, they're generally underpaid, and they're generally overworked. They're very, very spread thin. Some of the staffers that we get to meet with and work with are working on issues as wide as, the post office funding, to environmental law, to veterans affairs, right? And they're expected to be experts on all of those pieces of information and topics. And one, that isn't necessarily fair to them, and two, they're really looking for help, put plainly. And if you can present yourself as someone that is supportive of the policymaker legislative's priorities and you want to help them get work done, you're going to potentially get an email every now and then. You might get a call from the office. You might, get some outreach to say like, hey, what do you think about this? Or what are you hearing about this? And because these office staff members are, really, really spread thin. And there was some polling done in 2022 of congressional staffers, and only about 11% of staffers were found to be satisfied with the resources at their disposal to do the work that they're assigned, and only 6% of the staffers were satisfied with the level of staffing. And that just goes to show that these people are really worked hard and really worked overworked. Yeah, I'll just put it there. And I think that really like translates into there's high turnover rates. Some of the offices that I've been able to work with OFRF, over the past 2.5 years, we've seen 4 different staffers working on the agriculture issues, and that's something that is really hard because that institutional knowledge quickly disappears. But then also the relationships with that staffer disappear, right? And that's really, if you can suggest in meetings, if your relationship with the office is getting better, just really suggest that you are included in exit memos for staffers in this area. That's something that we've done at OFRF and we've been very successful at. And when new staffers come online, sometimes they'll reach out to us and be like, hey, y'all were mentioned in our exit memo. I'd love to set up a meeting and get to know the issues, right? And that's great, right? That's getting to the point where our relationship with that office is now at the level where we can both be like collaborative ally rather than just, an advocate. And that's something that is ultimately the goal of what we're trying to do. And then, lastly, that just the effectiveness, right, of that personal engagement, those personal visits in DC, the in-district meetings where legislator staffer might visit your farm, or even, taking the moment to send a piece of mail rather than just an email or a phone call, have been found to be effective, right? Over 80% effectiveness of just the impact of that communication. So, this just really goes to show that, social media alerts and those other types of communication can be effective in some regards, but if you want to like have a outsized impact, trying to take that time, and even if it's 5 minutes to jot something down and send it over, that's something that will help. And now the wrinkle of the Hatch Act. As I said, the real goal here is to just become an ally of the office and provide that education role rather than the really making sure to have a specific action or anything like that, which constitutes lobbying. But I definitely want to be clear, right? If there's any researchers that are at public universities that are watching this, y'all are government employees, which means that there's really special rules that apply to what you can and can't do using your individual versus your university role. All of us have a constitutional right to engage with the political activities, as long as you do it on your own time, do it without use of university resources, and keep records showing 1 and 2, right? Making sure that you can provide information or receipts or whatever information is needed to show that you did not use public dollars to engage in this process is important. Sometimes you can use your title as a professor, sometimes you can't. It really depends on the rules of your institutions. Sometimes just like a disclaimer, that's along the lines of like title for identification purposes only. This endorsement is made in a personal capacity and does not represent the views of University X, right? Something like that in any outreach is helpful. But I think the biggest thing is just reach out to government relations office or government affairs office for your institution. They have worked to really cultivate strong relationships with policymakers in the states and districts that they occupy, and they already have a lot of the connections or knowledge that you're looking to establish, and they'll oftentimes be really excited, that a researcher is wanting to share their research with a legislator to make sure that they understand the impact of some of the policies that they support, right? If you do want help reaching out to your government affairs office or anything like this, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email will be at the end of this presentation. Feel free to reach out with any questions or anything like that. And yeah, I definitely want to kind of stress this like advocacy versus education work, right? The advocacy is asking for specific action, which, is lobbying, right? Saying like, can you sign on to this bill? Can you appropriate dollars to this project or program, things like that. Whereas if you're simply letting the legislative office know that my research project in District B has been going on for the past 2 years, and here we finally have some like preliminary results that I'd love to highlight to you and show what we were doing for the district, right? That's very different. That's just letting them know about something that's happening in their district, and that's generally allowed. But again, reach out to your government affairs or government relations office and have that conversation. Some ways to get involved with the policymaking process. Again, reach out to your government relations office if that's applicable to you. But then there's also, reaching out to legislative offices, offering testimony, both verbal and written, and then providing some letters to the editor for your local news outlets. I think that direct outreach is generally what we think about when we're talking about communicating with legislators and providing, this type of work. But that is the call to the office, the writing a letter, the writing an email, inviting to your farm, sharing the impacts of your research, just making sure that you're a resource for that and an ally for that office. Offering testimony, that's a little bit more detailed. That's actually one of the examples that we have is a researcher offering some testimony to a state regulatory process. And that's just both, you have ability to do verbal testimony, like awesome, please take advantage of that opportunity. That is a really rare and impactful way to provide information. But then there's also, written testimony, which is, provided on the record and makes sure that, if certain things are done, you can point to the record and make sure that the information was available at all times to the legislators that are trying to act on it. And then lastly, that letter to the editor. I think that's something folks discredit a lot, right? Like, letter to the editor, who the heck reads that? Like, why is this even like still a thing in the modern day and era? And studies continue to show that letters to the editor, or the commonplace, whatever an outlet might call it, is still one of the most frequently read sections of newspapers. And legislative offices are constantly looking for ways to get their fingers on the pulse of the community, right? On making sure that they're understanding how their constituents are feeling about different issues, especially local issues. And my time in interning in Congress, one of my tasks was actually to look through letters to the editor, and if there were repeat subjects week to week, or multiple letter to the editors on a certain subject, I'd bring them to the attention of the legislator, of the congresswoman. And that really shows that these things do matter. And if you can get a full conversation going on in the public space, that's a really high impact way with pretty low kind of level of work to make that high impact. If you want help writing that letter to the editor, definitely reach out. We won't go over the details on how to do that right now, but always helpful to do some practice and proofread and just work with someone to make that as strong as possible.